Welcome, everybody. We're doing another episode today of Indie Reads Aloud. Yvonne Rediger is back today. She hasn't been with us for a little while because she's been so busy writing. So we're so excited to have you back, Yvonne.
Thank you.
So you are, we haven't done this in a little while, so I'm going to read your bio just to remind people who you are,
Sure.
and then we'll chat.
Sure.
Yvonne was born and currently resides in Saskatchewan. That's in Canada for those of us who live in the mitten. She lived and worked in northern Manitoba, central Alberta, southern New Brunswick, and Vancouver Island, British Columbia. That's got to be a gorgeous place. I've just heard wonderful things about it
It
there.
is. It's lovely.
Yvonne has been writing since she was in her teens. Her favorite genres are urban fantasy, science fiction, and mystery, each with a bit of humor and sometimes romance. She's married to her scuba diving buddy, who is also her sailboat captain. She has 2 grown children and now grandchildren, right?
Mm-hmm.
Super. We also want to shout out to both of your children who are military active service personnel, and we appreciate their service and keeping Canadians safe.
Thank
And
you.
Americans too, because we're
Yep.
neighbors, right?
Well, there's a lot of cross visiting. Like she was in Colorado a couple weeks ago, so there's a lot of consultation between the two areas.
I have tremendous respect for military people. I know that there's a lot we could not do safely in this world without them. So I am
So true.
tremendously thankful.
So true.
Yvonne is a past president of the Vancouver Island Romance Authors Group. She is a member of the Saskatchewan Writers Guild, Saskatchewan Romance Writers, and the Prairie Writers Guild. I don't know how you have room in your schedule writing all the books you do and all these wonderful writing organizations. How do you manage that? How do you juggle family and writing and being a part of all of these different writing groups?
Well, it's they're not terribly demanding. I mean, you have to spend maybe an hour or so at it once a month type thing. I'm not on the board. I'm not doing any of those things, but there's some promotional things. I did write an article, a craft article on show don't tell for them. That comes out in the spring. So things like that, you spend a little bit of time at it. It's kind of like my break between the next novel I'm writing.
Yeah. Like the palate cleanser in between stories.
Yes. Yes. Pretty much. It's like, forget those words.
Well,
They're
and
gone.
also, I speak often about how important writing organizations are for support of your craft
Very much so. Very much so.
because
And connecting and networking.
so often what we do all alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to have community and podcasts and guilds and contests and all those other things that connect writers one to another. I think that
Oh, so much. Yeah.
helps keep us a little bit more sane than we otherwise would be.
Well, and then sometimes you just want to talk writing with somebody. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And as supportive as our sailboat captains are, they're not always wanting to get into the dregs of what writing is.
This
So
is true. This is true. Yeah. Yeah. He
I
does like
know
it
that.
though when I ask him questions about things, like how to build an alloy out of a couple cut types of metal or something. Is this possible? And he'll say, yes, it is, and here's how it's done.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah. Yeah. I have friends like that who have specific specialties that they either do as their day job or just
Yeah.
as intense hobbies, and I always call on them for fact checking in my novels just to
Oh
make
yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's great to have these resources.
Absolutely. So the new book is Storm State. This is book 4 in the Musgrave Landing mystery series, and there it is, you guys. I love your cover designer. Whoever is doing your covers is doing just a terrific job. I love
Her
the art.
her name is Michelle Lee, and yeah, she's pretty phenomenal. She came up with the series basically because they're all very similar to this,
Mm-hmm.
and I always want a different female on the front because this is Maisie. Before that, it was her grandmother. Actually, there's one with a gray hair in there, Gladys, and then before that, it was Alicia Hymir, whose house this is, and then before that, it's Jane Westcott, who is Maisie's boss. So everybody's kind of connected in Musgrave Landing. It is a village. Everybody knows everybody. So there's a lot of little nuggets in here from past books. So that go
I
back.
love cover artists who can incorporate those things
Yeah.
so that when we look at, so often we don't, I think, give enough credence to cover authors because
Well,
really that's the first impression of our books. And when you have a book in a series, you like to see that they're all connected.
well, that's what catches your eye in the bookstore, or
Mhm.
even when you're scrolling through online and looking for a book. Covers mean a lot. And
Absolutely.
Michelle is great with working with me. I'll come up with some basic, like I found this graphic and I said, this kind of really speaks to me of Maisie, but you're going to have to tweak it a little.
Mhm.
The first graphic was a little different, and she tweaked it to match Maisie because her mother's from Haiti. So her skin color is a little darker. She's got these wonderful amber eyes, and she's tall, very tall, after her father. So I mean, all these things. She's like, okay, well, we'll do this, this, and this. So and she does. She does an
And,
amazing job.
and really working with a great cover artist or an interior illustrator, it's so important to have that connection and so that you can work in concert.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, exactly. And I don't think I've seen. I think she sent one cover that I didn't quite tickle me, and she said, nope, nope. If you're not happy with it, I've got another idea. And she sent the second one, and it was like, yeah, that's it. Close my doors right off.
Yeah,
That's the one.
my
Yeah,
children's book illustrator does the same thing. Is
yeah,
this what you're looking for? Is this kind of, am I
yeah,
going the right direction?
yeah.
It's really nice to work in partnership that way.
Oh, it is so much, so much. And then she changed the covers for the Adam Norcross mystery series and updated them, and they
Excellent.
look so good. You can see
Nice.
one over my shoulder there, that one there with the
Hmm.
mountains, because it all takes place on Vancouver Island. The first book, the second book takes place here in the prairies, and the third book, which I'm working on now, takes place in Ottawa. So
Oh,
I have
fun.
no idea what we're going to do with that one, because it's gonna be a bit of a challenge. So maybe tulips or something. So we'll see.
How wonderful. Can you give us just a quick synopsis rather than me read it? Can you give us this quick synopsis about what Storm Stayed? What is that story? What are we gonna, because it is book 4, and
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to read the other 3 books yet.
Oh yeah.
So if you could describe to me what this story is about, I'd appreciate that.
No problem. Well, actually, I'll read you what murder and mystery are afoot in the storm-swept Musgrave Landing village. The power is out and a king tide is in. An unexpected visitor and an eclectic group of guests at Highmere House Conference Center add to the chaos and confusion enveloping this small British Columbia village. Cozy fans, mystery fans will love this book. A great read. That came from Nancy Bell, was one of the reviews I got.
Nice.
And she kind of encapsulates most of it right there.
Yeah.
It's a writers group that have come to Musgrave Landing, to the home has been, they use it as a conference center and a retreat. So
So it's
these
a story about a writers group.
it is.
How
It is.
fantastic.
Yes. And
Now,
it
do I need to read your series in order? Can they
nope,
be read as standalones?
nope. They're all written about a particular character, and this
Okay.
one's Maisie's book. But there is a little bit of overlap, but you can read one and you won't be lost because they're all
So I
about
could
this
read
one.
them out of order so I could go pick this
Yes.
one up right away and not be
Yes.
lost.
And many people have. So they were like, I didn't realize there
Fantastic.
was more than one book. And oh yeah, there is. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I hate committing to a series that I have to read in order
Oh,
because I'm
exactly.
never really sure when I'm going to be able to have time to sit down and read something. So
Mm.
I like it so that it's kind of like watching a television series when you are forced to watch them in order or else you lose track of what it is going on.
Yeah. And who's this
So
character? Where did they come from?
yeah,
Yeah.
so I like books. I have
Yeah.
sunshine coming through my window.
I see that. You have a nice little stripe down your front there.
So I really like books that are in series so that I
Mm.
get to know these characters as complements and as family, but
Right.
at the same time I don't need to hear their stories in order. So I really like that you're doing standalones in that way.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But there's a little cross,
Hmm.
and actually if you read all my books, you'll find that even genres cross. There's little nuggets that cross, or he's a
Nice.
character in different things. So
Little
it's
Easter eggs. I like that.
yep, yep,
That's
little
great.
Easter eggs, and
I'm super excited to hear you read some of this. And now, especially that I know it's about a writing group, my interest is piqued even more.
oh yeah,
So when you are ready, ma'am, please take the microphone and read aloud.
alrighty. Jane Birch gazed dubiously up at the stone exterior of Highmere House as she sat in the borrowed car. Looking through the rain-streaked windshield, her green eyes shifted to the second floor windows. With relief, she saw no one. It was silly, really, being haunted by the image of a man in the upstairs window from over 25 years ago. Back then, the place was shuttered, with the ground floor boarded up and looking for all the world as though the place were abandoned, except it wasn't. As a preteen, Jane was paid by her aunt to clean the cafe after homework was done. Visible from across the street, the three-story sandstone house had looked back at Jane as she swept the outdoor patio where customers could sit. The huge stone blocks, which made up the exterior walls, were much different than any other building in Musgrave Landing and older than most. The house had been built in 1899, and the corner window on the second floor across the way drew the eye. To this day, Jane swore she'd seen a man looking out the window on several different occasions, even though no one was supposed to live there anymore. Her Aunt Ethel said it was probably Mr. Willard, the groundskeeper. Jane's gut told her it was something different. The mansion sat there waiting until its mistress, the now late Mrs. Olivia Frost Highmere, decided it was time to reopen the house. Maisie Wyatt said she thought the second floor really was haunted. The hallway is really cold, and I get the weirdest feelings up there sometimes. Jane had automatically laughed, albeit nervously. The old story among Musgrave Landing villagers went that someone murdered the former millionaire, Mr. Alistair Highmere, and now he haunted the place. The actual truth behind the story was even stranger. Jane's lips flatlined as she grabbed the door handle. Get over yourself, she muttered, and exited the late model Forester station wagon. There is no such thing as ghosts. She closed the driver's side door. You are a mature businesswoman. Act like it. She had a customer waiting and an order to fill. Her running shoes made little sound on the gravel as she walked around to the rear of the station wagon. At least the worst of the predicted weather had not arrived. The temperature hadn't dropped, like the app on her phone had promised either. Still, the chilly December wind was up, trying its best to fling rain and water droplets from overhead branches at her from the surrounding trees. Not the nicest of winter mornings. The now refurbished Highmere house was a business opportunity for Jane. That was what her thoughts turned to. She was curious about the first party of guests booked into Highmere House Conference Center. It wasn't every day her inherited business, Jane's Eats and Treats, supplied 3 kinds of cheesecake for a business conference. Jane hadn't bothered changing out of her clothes to make this delivery. It was more important to be on time. Maisie had told Jane the expected group of 7 people screwed that up. Maisie had told Jane the expected group was 7 people. The thought made Jane nibble her bottom lip in doubt as she reached inside the car. She hoped she'd made the cheesecakes large enough to accommodate all the guests. It was better to have more than enough than not enough. Mrs. Rock would come back to her for more food items for the next conference, was her hope. Lifting out the first creation, she was glad Arlie had taken over wrapping up the food while she put her coat on. There was no way the wind and rain could penetrate the cellophane wrap, not after her father-in-law had done the construction. Leaving the door open, she carried the tray towards the back door of the house, or as the housekeeper referred to the old Highmere mansion, the HHCC, somewhat loftily. She should have parked closer and certainly would next time. The owner had set the place to rights almost 2 years ago. The furniture was back, the priceless artwork rehung, and the grounds were meticulously maintained. The place looked like it belonged to the owner of a big corporation, and they lived here, although that fact was only true a couple times a year. None of the family lived in the village full-time now that their matriarch, Mrs. Heimer Frost, had passed on. Shifting her load to a more comfortable position on her hip, Jane turned the corner on the brick path to arrive at the kitchen door. She was thankful the wood and metal awning afforded some cover from the precipitation. She glanced down at her burden. This tray contained the raspberry-topped decadent dessert, whole cakes, not cut up, just as Mrs. Rock requested. 2 more waited in the back of Gladys's station wagon. One, a creamy chocolate confection with dark chocolate curls on top, and the other was the same as the first, except blueberry topping. The black glossy door swung open, and the blocky figure of Aggie Rock beamed a smile at Jane from across the threshold. Large square hands were folded over her middle, and her brown hair, peppered with gray, was in its usual tight roller curls. No makeup graced the housekeeper's lined face or around her navy blue eyes. The older woman's regular day dress was enshrouded by a heavy starched apron. The overgarment was something Jane would have thought a butcher might use for cutting up meat rather than someone working in a commercial kitchen. However, everyone knew Mrs. Rock made her own rules. Thank you, Jane. I'm so glad you're here early. Oh, and the raspberry cake looks perfect, just as I knew it would be. I thought you might want everything delivered ahead of time, Jane nodded. Absolutely, Mrs. Rock turned to call behind her. Tiffany, come take this dessert and put it in the cooler, please. Maisie, you can help Jane unload. Yes, Mrs. Rock, a twin chorus of voices chimed. Tiffany, a tall, slender, red-headed young woman appeared to take the dessert from the owner. Jane raised her eyebrows at the long black skirt and crisp white long-sleeve blouse Tiffany wore, along with the ruffled white apron over top. She glanced up, but there was no maid's cap on the girl's head, although Tiffany's wiry red hair was pinned to the back of her head and still gave the impression of the turn-of-the-century housemaid. Tiffany's fresh face, liberally covered with freckles, curved into a smile for Jane, and a soft ooh was emitted for the cheesecake. Jane decided right then Tiffany had good taste. Maisie popped out of the kitchen pantry behind the tall redhead. She, too, was dressed in the same black and white uniform. Her mid-length blonde ponytail bounced as Maisie scooted past Mrs. Rock. Jane and Maisie exchanged a smile as the other woman went by. The cafe owner followed and had to sharpen her pace to catch up to the taller Maisie. Maisie was on loan from Jane's cafe to Heimer House for this conference, partly as a favor to Mrs. Rock and partly because Jane knew Maisie was saving up money for her own future. Winter was a slower time at the cafe, and Jane couldn't give Maisie as many hours as she would like. Heimer House had employed Maisie before to serve at several dinners for local groups, and they paid well. The relationship was beneficial for all, since Heimer House only boasted a staff of 2 full-time people. When guests were expected, the housekeeper would call in part-time people like Tiffany and Maisie. I left the tailgate down. We just have to grab the other 2, Jane said, as she and Maisie headed to the back of the car. How's it going? She said this in a lower tone as they arrived back at the station wagon. She carefully picked up the blueberry cheesecake. Not bad, Maisie waggled her head. She balanced the chocolate dessert in one hand and closed the tailgate to the ancient Forester station wagon with the other. Mrs. Rock is very precise and wants everything done a certain way, perfectly. Not that I blame her. She does have a formidable reputation to uphold. Jane and Maisie walked side by side again to the back door. It was good, Jane noted. Maisie was proficient with carrying large trays of food one-handed. The 20-year-old had to use her other hand to pull the hem of her long skirt up to allow her feet freedom of movement and to keep the muddy gravel from the hem. By the time they got to the back kitchen entrance, Mrs. Rock had disappeared, so Jane followed Maisie to the pantry and the walk-in cooler. Have any guests arrived yet? Jane held the stack of trays from the cafe used to transport the desserts. She watched Maisie close the heavy door to the cooler after they exited the enclosure. Nope, we don't expect them until the noon ferry. Maisie smoothed the wrinkle from her apron. Almost everything is ready. We hope the guests will be here well before the rain begins. I hope so too. Arlie thinks the ferry will be canceled this afternoon because of the weather. Did he feel the barometer change in his bones again? Maisie wrinkled her nose at her as she grinned. He always says that. Arlington Birch had a fondness for Maisie, and not merely because he dated her grandmother, Gladys. Jane's father-in-law had trained Maisie in the running of the cafe, and she was the only other person he trusted to run his espresso machine. He hovered when Jane ran the thing. Oh, yes. Jane tipped her head again with a nod. Then she blinked and gave her head a little shake to escape the disturbing feeling that swept over her. She shifted her eyes to the high kitchen windows. Gloomy charcoal clouds were creeping across the sky above the treetops. Maybe the storm had caused the unease. Is something wrong, Jane? Maisie followed her back into the kitchen proper. Jane tucked the trays under her arm and waved off her reaction. I hope the weather system will blow through quickly and leave my roof shingles where they are. She gave an awkward smile. They both found Mrs. Rock slowly stirring a large cast aluminum pot on the 6-burner gas stove. The woman's shorter stature forced her to be up on tiptoe. Maisie briskly walked across the room and snagged a small step stool by the kitchen door. She brought it over to the housekeeper and placed it on the floor at the older woman's feet. You might find this useful, Mrs. Rock. Why, thank you, Maisie. So thoughtful. The housekeeper mounted the steps and sighed. It certainly removes the strain from my shoulders. Maisie glanced at Jane. I have to finish dusting the library. Of course you do. You've got work. And the other woman was gone. That girl is a gem. No wonder you won't let her go. I'd hire her in a heartbeat to help me run this place full time if I could get my budget approved. Jane chuckled. Maisie is free to decide where she wants to work. She changed the subject to avoid the discussion on the topic again. Your soup smells amazing. Thank you. It's my own recipe. It's called Wild Mushroom Surprise. I picked the mushrooms yesterday. I thought it would be a good choice since 2 of the 7 people coming for the conference are vegetarians. Good idea, Jane nodded. What's this conference about? Jane watched the older woman sprinkle fresh parsley on the soup's creamy surface. Dunwolf Publishing has booked 6 rooms for the weekend. The guests are writers and editors, I was given to understand. The head editor's assistant, Hazel Dell, booked the HHCC weeks ago. Some kind of writing retreat, she said. Sounds interesting. I hope so. Sylvia Heimir said she was going to be here this weekend too. Ms. Dell and Ms. Sylvia knew each other from school, I'm given to understand. She was interested in meeting the senior editor, so I suggested she come and act as a hostess this weekend. Mrs. Rock put the large wooden spoon down on a ceramic spoon rest. Still, Miss Sylvia can become distracted, quite easily, actually. There was resignation in her tone. Mrs. Rock spoke of all the Heimir children like they were her own, but then she had known the 3 of them from birth. Jane nodded, but kept her thoughts to herself. The youngest Heimir child was said to be flighty at best. If she actually showed up as announced, it would be a first. Which reminds me, I must review the guest list with the girls. Mrs. Rock patted her apron pockets as though she were looking for something. I'll leave you to it then. I have to return Gladys's car and get your finger sandwiches ready for lunch. Lovely. They'll be fresh then. Thank you, Jane. Mrs. Rock braced her right hand on the edge of the stove and climbed down from the stool. Any word on your van? Ben's waiting for distributor parts, Arlie says. Jane nodded. Good news then. And thanks again, said Mrs. Rock. No problem. We're all happy to help. Jane felt like she had been dismissed, which amused her as she moved to the back door. With her hand on the knob, Jane looked back at Mrs. Rock with a small frown. She wondered about her bad feeling and hoped the sensation had nothing to do with the mushrooms.
Very nice. What a great
I'm only
introduction to a new book. Yay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So this is book 4 in this series.
Yes.
Have you found, we all claim that this isn't a true thing, but secretly know it different. Have you found a new favorite character throughout the 4 series? Can you pick out one particular character that resonates with you the most or challenges you the most, perhaps, out of the 4-book series?
Arlie Birch, the Jane's father-in-law. I
And
love
why
writing.
is it?
He's got no filter. He says exactly what he's thinking all the time. And in Condo Crazy, he got into some trouble.
Indeed.
He
I
and
remember when you read that.
yeah, he and Gladys got up to no good there. And Jane knew about it, and he knew Jane knew. And it took a while for him to, I don't know, dial it back, if he ever did.
If he ever did. So with this particular book, it's a writing conference set on a secluded place in an old mansion. You have to take a ferry to get there. Did you find any logistic issues with writing this story? Did you perhaps start to write something and then realize that because of the geography that you'd created that you couldn't do that and you had to do a rewrite?
Nope. Musgrave Landing it's a real place. It's on Salt Spring Island, just off the coast of the big island, Vancouver Island. And you do have to take a ferry to get there. However, Musgrave Landing in reality does not have a ferry. It's just a little hamlet. But in my writing of the area, I have created a village and all the infrastructure that goes with it.
Fantastic.
We used to live in a little place called Crofton, which is just down the coast from where Musgrave Landing is. And we had a ferry right in town that would take you to Salt Spring. That's how you get to Salt Spring. That's one of them anyway. There's another one up in Nanaimo and a few other places. But because of that, I actually had a book signing at that cafe. And the woman that runs it, she held up one. I've got a photo of it somewhere where she's holding up and she looks the spitting image of Jane. And she's running this cafe. And it was that cafe we used to have writer meetings there. And it gave me the idea.
So you're truly writing what you know.
Oh, yeah. Because that little cafe, it gave me the idea for Death and Cupcakes, the first in the series.
Yeah. Fantastic. Death and Cupcakes. I love that title. It's just great. Yep. What have you got planned? You kind of hinted a little bit in the green room about something that may be coming up next. What's the next piece that's coming out from you?
I have right now. I'm currently working on the Adam Norcross Mysteries, book 3, tentatively titled "The Middle Distance," and it follows The Wrong Words and the Right Road. So the middle distance, the first one was in BC on Vancouver Island. The second one took place here in Saskatchewan. The third one's in Ottawa in Ontario. And it follows, there is some running themes in there. There's some arcs. He works with Sergeant Bethany Leith of the RCMP, who they met in the first murder mystery they had to solve on Vancouver Island. And she gets herself in a bit of a pickle, and she's home in the book 2 here. So he comes here to give her a hand to solve another mystery because someone ends up dead on her family's land.
Uh-oh, that can't be good.
Yeah, and he still has official standing, so he can investigate and she can tag along this time. Whereas the first one, she was in charge and he tagged along. So the thing is about Adam Norcross, though, is that he works for a federal government agency that is not really named. It's kind of called the Frost, or he works in the basement. And yeah, then he has access to things that most people don't. He's got access to data. He's got access to resources most people don't, more so even than law enforcement. So he can kind of go international if he needs to.
How fun. How fun. I mean, just that I'm already imagining
Yeah.
the storylines that you could create with just that one little bit of information and the different directions it could go. That sounds like a real joy to write.
It goes one step further. Norcross actually has a precognitive ability. He can tell when someone's lying to him.
Oh.
And he can tell when all the puzzle pieces, when he's got all the information, and it will shift so he can figure out what's going on. And he's usually well ahead of everybody else. So, but he has
okay,
to.
that adds a whole nother layer of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So he'll in the first one, you had to bring the sergeant along with him. So she, realized what he was trying to, let her know what was happening and give her the right keys, the clues and stuff, so that she would get there. And then the second one, they're kind of side by each. They kind of both moved along fairly quickly together. Well, in this one, he's a little further ahead because it's right in his bailiwick of politics and intrigue. The issue is in book 2, the reason why she was suspended from her job is partly to do with some of the characters that are in this third book. So, and while he took care of part of the issue, there's always more.
Always.
So now she'll be working with him in Ottawa, and they'll with another couple new characters, and then and we'll see where that takes us.
So much fun. You need to come back and read these for us.
Yeah.
So that we can hear a little bit more. That'll be terrific fun. I look forward to having you back on the program again.
Sure.
Please, again, extend our thanks to your children for their service. And please know that we are always thinking happy thoughts about keeping everyone safe.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for your time today, Yvonne.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.